Welcome to our deep dive today.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at semiconductors.
Okay.
You know, these tiny little computer chips.
Right.
They're actually at the heart of this global power struggle that's really reshaping geopolitics.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how something so small can have such a big impact.
I know, it's really kind of mind-blowing.
It is.
So we've got a bunch of different sources for this deep dive today.
Okay.
We've got interviews, news articles, we've got academic analyses, even industry reports.
Wow.
And they're all pointing to this really interesting intersection of technology and global power.
Yeah.
And since you follow geopolitics so closely, I figured this would be right up your alley.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm really fascinated to see what we can uncover.
Well, one name that keeps popping up in our research is Donald Trump and his statements about Taiwan's semiconductor industry.
Yeah. His claim that Taiwan stole our chip business.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting how often politicians use very emotional language to oversimplify complex issues.
Right.
And, you know, Trump's rhetoric on Taiwan really follows this classic playbook.
Okay.
Where you blend some truth with exaggeration and fear-mongering, really to try and manipulate public perception.
Well, let's hear it straight from the source.
Okay.
Here's that clip from the Joe Rogan Experience.
All right. Wow.
That's quite a statement.
Yeah, it is.
It reminds me of how he, talked about Japan in the 80s when he was saying that they were an economic enemy,
Right.
stealing American jobs.
Yeah.
Now it seems like semiconductors and Taiwan have become his new target.
It's a pattern we've seen time and time again.
Yeah.
He picks a target, paints them as a threat, and uses that mix of truths and exaggerations to create this narrative that really resonates with fear and anxieties.
And it's not just talk either.
No, it's not.
His rhetoric has real-world consequences.
Yeah.
We saw how his statements actually impacted Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company's stock price.
Precisely.
TSMC?
TSMC.
Yep.
Disinformation can have a very significant impact on markets and global perceptions.
So while I understand the economic arguments that he's making,
Right.
I'm curious about the psychology behind it.
Yeah.
Why do you think this type of rhetoric is so effective?
It often plays on our inherent biases and, that desire for simple explanations.
Right?
People are drawn to these narratives that confirm their existing beliefs,
Yeah.
even if those narratives are based on just distorted information.
That's a really sobering thought.
It is.
I mean, it really highlights the need for critical thinking
Absolutely.
and being media literate,
Yes.
especially now when, information spreads so rapidly.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, we really need to be more discerning about the information that we consume.
We do.
Always question the source.
Right.
Look for evidence.
Absolutely.
So let's shift our focus now to Taiwan itself.
Okay.
It's incredible how this place, the size of Maryland,
Wow.
has become so dominant in the semiconductor industry.
Yeah. Taiwan's rise is really a testament to their strategic investments, their innovation, and a very relentless pursuit of manufacturing excellence.
Yeah.
To understand their significance, I think we have to grasp the complexity of semiconductor manufacturing.
Okay.
Imagine building a city on a surface smaller than your fingernail.
Wow.
That's essentially what TSMC does. Billions of transistors packed onto a tiny piece of silicon,
Okay.
all working together with incredible precision.
It really is mind-blowing.
It is.
And the fact that TSMC controls over 60% of the global foundry market and produces over 90% of the most advanced chips, it's amazing.
It's a testament to their dominance in the market.
And this leads us to another important point,
Okay.
which is this intricate web of global interdependence
Yeah.
that makes up the semiconductor supply chain.
Absolutely.
Raw materials come from all over the world.
Right.
The U.S. leads in design expertise. Taiwan dominates manufacturing.
Yeah, it's a very delicate balance. It is. Each player relies on the others.
It also highlights the vulnerabilities of the system,
Yes, it does.
like we saw with the chip shortage during the pandemic.
That was such a stark reminder of how fragile the global system can be.
It was.
The auto industry alone lost an estimated $210 billion
Wow.
from production cuts.
Yeah, companies like General Motors and Toyota had to scale back operations.
Yeah, they couldn't get the chips they needed.
Right.
And it wasn't just cars, it was everything.
Everything.
Laptops, gaming consoles, everything.
It really showed how, a disruption in one part of the world can affect the entire global economy.
Exactly.
And that vulnerability is even more concerning when you think about the rising geopolitical tensions surrounding Taiwan.
This is where the conversation gets really interesting.
Yeah, it does.
It does. It's interesting you brought up TSMC.
Right.
They've actually embarked on this pretty ambitious global expansion plan.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Aiming to build 10 new factories by 2025.
Wow. So not putting all their eggs in one basket?
That's exactly. They're looking at Japan, Germany, the U.S.
Okay.
Diversifying their manufacturing footprint.
So that would make them less vulnerable.
Yeah, less vulnerable to regional disruptions.
Right.
Whether that's natural disasters, a pandemic, political instability.
Makes sense from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
But I imagine there are also geopolitical factors at play here, too.
Oh, absolutely. TSMC is facing a lot of pressure from both the U.S. and China.
Right.
The U.S. wants to secure its own supply of chips.
To reduce reliance on Taiwan.
Exactly. And China wants to become less dependent on foreign technology.
So TSMC is trying to kind of walk a tightrope between these two superpowers?
Yeah, a very delicate tightrope.
It is.
And it's not just TSMC.
Right.
Governments around the world are getting more and more involved in the industry.
Really?
Offering huge subsidies.
Wow.
And incentives to try and attract chip manufacturing to their countries.
I mean, we talked about the U.S. CHIPS Act.
Right.
But what about other countries? Like you mentioned Germany as a potential location.
Yeah, Germany's investing a ton in this sector. They pledged 10 billion euros.
Wow.
For a new TSMC plant.
Okay, so half the funding.
Yeah. They really see semiconductors as crucial for their economic future. And they're not afraid to spend big.
Sounds like the competition is really heating up.
It is, and the stakes are so high now.
Yeah.
It's not just about economic competition anymore.
Right.
It's about national security, technological dominance.
Right.
This broader geopolitical rivalry between the U.S. and China.
Yeah, it's been called a chip war.
It has. And it's just getting more and more complex.
So speaking of China,
yeah,
how are they responding to all of this?
Well, they've been very vocal about their ambitions to be technologically independent.
Right.
So they're pouring billions of dollars into research and development, trying to catch up in the industry.
Okay.
They recognize how important semiconductors are for their economic growth.
Right, and for their national security.
Exactly.
But from what I've read, they still have a long way to go to catch up to TSMC and Intel.
That's true.
Especially when it comes to those really advanced chips.
It's a very complex industry.
Yeah.
It takes immense expertise, a skilled workforce, access to cutting-edge technology,
right,
a strong supply chain.
So catching up to the leaders is a really monumental task.
It is.
Yeah.
But they are making some significant strides.
So it sounds like they're in a race against time.
In many ways, they are.
Yeah.
And the outcome of that race is going to have major implications for the global balance of power.
Right, because if China achieves semiconductor independence,
yeah,
that could really enhance their economic and military capabilities.
Exactly.
Potentially reshaping global trade, supply chains,
yeah,
even military alliances.
It's a very real possibility.
So we've been focusing on the competition.
Yeah.
But is there any room for cooperation in this chip war?
That's a great question and an important one. Despite the rivalry, there are definitely areas where collaboration is not only possible, but really necessary.
Okay.
Like supply chain security, for example. A major disruption in the supply chain would be devastating for everyone.
Right.
Regardless of political affiliations.
No one wants to see a repeat of 2020.
Exactly.
So even with the competition, there's this shared understanding that everyone benefits from a stable and productive industry.
I think that's right.
Okay.
And that means cooperating on things like industry standards, cybersecurity, research collaborations.
So maybe it's not a winner-take-all scenario?
I don't think so.
More nuanced.
Yeah, I think it's a blend of competition and cooperation.
Right.
Driven by both economic and geopolitical factors.
Yeah, almost like a high-stakes poker game.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
With, billions of dollars and national security on the line.
And each player's trying to outmaneuver the others.
Right.
But they also recognize that they need to collaborate to some extent to keep the game going.
That's fascinating.
It is.
And it's rapidly evolving.
Yeah.
But with all the focus on economics and geopolitics, I'm curious about the social implications.
You're raising a really important point.
Yeah.
As this technology advances, we really have to consider those broader societal impacts.
So we've been exploring this complex world of semiconductors, where these tiny chips have become these pawns in a global power struggle.
It's true.
It's fascinating how something so small can have such massive economic and geopolitical implications.
It's a reminder that technology is never neutral.
Right.
It's always shaped by political forces, economic interests, and human choices.
Yeah, we've talked about Trump's rhetoric, Taiwan's dominance, the U.S. push for domestic manufacturing, China's ambitions for technological independence. It's a multifaceted story with no easy answers.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Right.
what do you think the future holds for this chip war?
Well, it's tough to predict with certainty,
Yeah.
but I think we're going to see these trends continue.
Okay.
The competition between the U.S. and China will likely intensify,
Right.
driving even more innovation and investment in the technology.
So a continued race for technological supremacy.
Yes, but with a crucial caveat.
Okay.
I think we're also going to see a growing recognition that cooperation is needed,
Right.
particularly when it comes to supply chain resilience,
Yeah.
cybersecurity, setting industry standards.
Right. A complete decoupling of the global semiconductor industry is unlikely and probably harmful.
Yeah, to all parties involved.
Yeah, because as we discussed earlier, everyone benefits from a stable and predictable market.
Right.
And disruptions to the supply chain can have huge consequences for the
Right.
global economy.
Yeah, so I think we're going to see a future where competition and cooperation kind of coexist.
Okay, so a very complex and dynamic landscape.
Exactly.
It's almost like a high-stakes poker game,
I like that.
with billions of dollars in national security at stake.
Yeah, and each player is trying to outmaneuver the others.
Right.
But they all need to collaborate to some extent to keep the game going.
Right.
It's what makes it so interesting.
It does. It's constantly evolving.
Yeah, and it's a story that's still being written.
And the stakes are high.
Incredibly high. And it's important to remember that this isn't just about chips and circuits.
Right.
This is about the future of technology, the global balance of power, and the kind of world we want to live in.
That brings us back to the social implications.
Yeah.
As this technology keeps advancing, we need to be mindful of the broader impact on our lives.
We have to ask ourselves those tough questions about the ethical implications of things like AI, the potential for surveillance technologies to be misused, the impact of automation on the workforce.
Right. It's not just technological challenges. These
Yeah.
are societal challenges.
Yes, that require careful consideration and informed decision-making.
So we can't just blindly embrace these advancements without thinking about the consequences.
Absolutely, both intended and unintended.
Right. So what does this all mean for our listener?
It means staying informed and engaged is more important now than ever.
Okay.
We need to understand how complex this industry is,
Uh-huh.
the geopolitical forces at play,
Right.
the ethical considerations involved.
It's not just about chips anymore. It's about our collective future.
Exactly. And while the future is uncertain,
Right.
we can shape it through informed choices and thoughtful actions.
Well said. I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the world of semiconductors.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
We hope you found this deep dive informative and thought-provoking and encourage you to continue exploring this topic.
Yeah.
We'll include links to all of the sources we used in the show notes.
Right.
Until next time, stay curious.